Okay, welcome to Life Stories at Lunch with our Friday live stories guest. We've had some fantastic guests, Stephen, over the last few weeks. Eric Woodward, Davy Walker last week was fascinating. Pete Woodin, Clive Ross, the chaplain of Watford FC. And today we've got another football theme. We've got Stephen Turnbull, who's going to tell us a little bit about an amazing thing that happened a few years ago with St Mirren and the role that he played in helping St Mirren do something that, a bit like Rangers last night, was quite incredible. But before we get into all that, Stephen, just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. It's a real pleasure to be on Life Stories. I've watched so many of the Life Stories videos. Absolutely incredible. Great stories, really inspirational. And inspiration is very much what I'm about. I'm on career number 2/3 just now. The first 20 years of my working life, I worked in house building as a quantity surveyor, worked my way up through various companies and eventually started my own house building company and won a lot of national awards, including Conversion Project of the Year at the Scottish Home Awards, where we converted some 150-year-old farm buildings into luxury housing whilst respecting the history of the buildings. And a year later won Scotland's House of the Year at the Scottish Home Awards, which was incredible. You look to do your best in your chosen career, and for me that was kind of the pinnacle in house building. It was like the Oscars, the house building awards, Scottish Home Awards. So it was great to win Scotland's House of the Year. I then decided to move into another career, into psychology. I'd studied some psychology and worked a lot in sports psychology. I mostly work with people who have anxiety or depression. Also work with businesses and within the third sector to help organisations grow, to get the best out of their staff, to fulfil their full potential. And that's a real focus that I have with people, is to help them fulfil their full God-given potential. Psychologists conclude that only 1.5% of the human race fulfill their full potential. 98.5% of people don't. They fall short of what they could have achieved. So yeah, working in psychology since 2008. And some of the work that I've been doing in the third sector, that's really escalated since COVID came along. I was working up to 1 day a week with West Lothian Food Bank to help develop them as a business, as an organisation, as a charity. They were struggling 3 years ago financially, almost failed financially. But in 3 years that I've been working with them, I've helped to change them, to grow them, to moving from 3 staff to 23 staff, no vans to a fleet of 4 vans, 1 tiny warehouse and 1 tiny office to a massive warehouse complex and enough office space for 23 staff. And during COVID, we started the West Lothian Food Network, and I coordinate 39 charities who help to address food insecurity. So during the whole of the pandemic, the whole 2 years now that we've been on this crazy journey that's turned life upside down, we have worked together, these 39 charities, to feed an average of 4,000, just over 4,000 people a week.
Wow.
For 2 years, it's over 2.5 million meals that we've provided.
Wow.
And we've saved 150 tons of food going to waste, going to landfill. So we've acquired 150 tons of food from businesses and organisations for nothing, for no cost, which is amazing. And we've achieved grants of almost £2 million to further this work and develop work now to look to end poverty. Massive challenge, but to help thousands, if possible, in West Lothian come out of poverty. There's 42,000 people living in poverty in West Lothian. Wow. So there we are. My working life, which has been 30 years, has been in construction, psychology and the third sector.
and you're married and you've got 2 children, so you've got a busy home life on top of all that as well, which is obviously a challenge in itself, as we all know. And when you're doing all these different things, Stephen, you picked up some amazing experiences, and we could go into lots of different things in your life, but one of the ones that really stands out to me is in 2013, when you went on this amazing journey with St Mirren Football Club. Tell us the background to how you got involved in St Mirren and your role at the club.
Yeah, absolutely. I love football, and it was a great journey too. I love all sports, so I enjoy doing sports psychology. It's fascinating, ticks a lot of boxes for me. The way I got involved was I'd really just started out in psychology at the time, and I met Danny Lennon, who was the manager at St Mirren. I was speaking at a dinner event, and Danny was a guest at the event, and we got speaking afterwards, and he invited me in. This was his first season at the time in the Premier League. He had only managed for 2 seasons before that, and took Cowdenbeath up 2 divisions in 2 years, which was phenomenal, and absolutely deserved his shot at the show, at the big table in Scottish football, which is the Scottish Premier League. So he was managing with St Mirren. Inherited a team that would be described as a yo-yo team. They'd get promoted, relegated, promoted, relegated, promoted, relegated. That had been their kind of journey for 20 odd years. But Danny had taken on the team, and they were close. They were hovering above the relegation zone, and he just wanted to squeeze an extra 1% out of his players. That's what he said to me at the time. And could we help them? It was specifically at the time they were conceding goals in the last minute of games, in the last moments of games, and they'd done it for like 8 or 9 games in a row. So he brought me in to address the psychology of that, and I did. I worked with the whole team, and there's a couple of techniques that we used to address that, and they never conceded in the last moments of a game for the rest of that season, and they stayed up. They had to go and win at Aberdeen, which they hadn't done for 10 years. But we worked on that, on the belief, and thankfully they went and they won 1-0 and stayed up. So I worked with St Mirren for almost 4 seasons, about 3.5 seasons. So leading up to, that was 2010, I started working with them. And it was 2013 that they won the cup, which was tremendous. It involved a lot of change. Some of the things that happened to build up to the League Cup success was that Danny really wanted to bring the youth setup at the club closer to the first team, and I was involved a lot with that, working with some of the young players that were coming through, who were players like John McGinn and Kenny McLean, who both play in the English Premiership now. John McGinn at Aston Villa, Kenny McLean at Norwich City. So I worked with players like that, and we brought in players like Paul Dummett from Newcastle United, who was a youth player, hadn't played a first team game yet, but now he's played close to 300 games for Newcastle United now, and played for his country too, Wales. So we were developing the youth team, and in the cup final, Paul Dummett played the full game, as did John McGinn. I think we had 5 players that were under 23, if I remember correctly. So that was the build-up, working closer to try and develop the youth system, and working closer with the players to help this club not to be a yo-yo club. And in my time there, they stayed up, and they had their highest league finish in the Scottish Premier League ever, which was phenomenal. Twice they achieved that. Wow.
I just really want to zone in on that 2013 period. And I suppose the 2012-13 season as you lead in to that cup final. You mentioned some great players, John McGinn, just a tremendous player in the Premier League now. Was it clear early on that these were special players, that these were footballers who were going to go a lot further than St Mirren, with all due respect to St Mirren?
Yeah, I would say so. John, we had a great youth system at St Mirren. And John had played for Scotland under 17, under 19. I think he captained under 19s. And it was clear that he was going to do well. Yes, in that season, he made his debut against Dundee early in that season. St Mirren didn't have a great start to the season, a few injuries and things like that. And we were playing against Dundee, which was a kind of bottom of the table clash at the time. And we just needed a spark to turn things around. And we talked about it and decided to give John his debut. And did tremendously well, as did Kenny McLean in that game. And if I remember rightly, St Mirren won 3-1 that day. And that was a kind of turning point in the season, propelled the season on forward. We've talked about the young players, but there were some amazing senior players at the club. Former Scotland internationals, Stephen Thompson, who had played down south for Burnley and Cardiff City as well, had played for Rangers, and Gary Teal, who was a Scotland international, played for Wigan, I think. Paul, your team?
Yeah, he did very well for us in the Premier League. Yeah.
So they were great leaders, great role models for the young players, and they had a great influence on the squad as a whole. And it was a great blend of youth and experience. So the team found a good footing in the league that year in the first half of the season. But the cup run was the standout success of that year. Absolutely.
Just before we go into the games and the key moments along that journey, I just want to touch a bit on Danny Lennon. Now, you did a series of what motivates the motivator, which was based all around the work that you'd done with Danny. Just tell us a bit about him as a person and as a manager.
Danny's a great person. He's a very positive guy, a real people person. He loves everybody. And it's one of the things that I think that brought about the success at St Mirren, that he treated everyone the same, whether it was the star striker or the dinner ladies. Everybody was treated in the same way, same respect. Always looked to bring the best out of people, always looked to put a smile on people's faces, did it often. So very, very positive man, very, very, very much a football man, always learning, student of the game, and was always looking to learn of people. And he invited in coaches who weren't in employment at the time to come in and do a session or observe a session and have lunch together. And he was always connecting with people, which was fantastic. And Danny's a man of faith also, that he, in the dealing with the pressures of football management, it's a very public job, as you can see, and everybody's got an opinion about football. It's very emotional, and football managers get a lot of stick, rightly or wrongly, and it's a lot of pressure. And every game is scrutinised and analysed from different angles. And Danny always used to talk to me about how he could take his stresses and worries and concerns in prayer and offload them, which is tremendous. So Danny was a great motivator, but one of the reasons he brought me in was to, the question is, it's the same for any manager. Who motivates the motivator? And every manager now, every successful manager, every manager in big clubs has a team of people around about them, coaches for different reasons, all specialists in what they do, whether it's for example, the set piece specialists. One of the coaches we had at the time at St Mirren, Austin McPhee, is now the set piece coach at Aston Villa. Wow. And has also been world renowned for being a set piece coach, and has worked with the Danish champions and helped Northern Ireland get to the Euros, and now he works with Scotland. So every manager has a team of specialists around about them, and the manager manages them. Different from generations ago when the manager was everything. He was the one-man show. But now they have a team of people. And Danny, he believed very strongly in psychology and it was a real pleasure to work with him. And he gave me every opportunity to help the players and made me available to all the players. Some players loved that, embraced it, wanted everything I could give them. Other players resisted it, saying, "Nah, it's not really for me." But that's the same in every walk of life. But a real pleasure to work with Danny. Still work with Danny now, helping him with various things. And he's working with Clyde right now, and took them up a league. First time they've been promoted in 10 years. And working with a small budget compared to the rest of the teams, but he's got them up mid-table in the league that he's in, which is tremendous.
And that's probably a good place to start with the cup run. So the teams you played against, take us through some of the budgets that they had compared to your budget at St Mirren.
Yeah, so the biggest team that we played was Celtic in the semi-final. Celtic had the biggest budget in Scotland at the time. St Mirren's entire operating budget as a business was £2 million at the time. So that was all the first team, all the youth team, all the coaches in the youth set up, all the groundsmen, the people that sold the tickets and operated the admin, and all the management team, etc. It was all £2 million. Compare that to Celtic's captain, Scott Brown, got paid more than £2 million in the season that we played them. So one player at Celtic earned more than every single person connected with St Mirren. So the budget I think Celtic had was, I think it was 16 times bigger than St Mirren at the time.
Wow. Incredible. Take us through some of the games then. So how does the cup run start, and how do you get to the semi-final game?
Yeah, I think when you look back at any team's cup run, one of the first games, you're always playing lower league opposition, and you always seem to kind of scrape through. So we scraped through 1-0 against Ayr United. Was the game that really stuck out for me in the early cup run. They were the league below, and they played with 10 men behind the ball, and it was a tough game. And then we only scored the breakthrough goal with a couple of minutes to go. Lee Mayer, who was one of the centre halves, scored in that game. Tremendous. So that was a tough. You kind of scrape through, and then your reward is quarter-final. We're drawn away to Aberdeen. Again, in terms of budget, Aberdeen were, I think, maybe 6 times our budget at the time. And to go to Pittodrie midweek is a tough ask. St Mirren had only won there once in 10 years. And you're playing against some Scotland internationals, etc. But that was a tough game midweek, and we were really excited about the game. We worked on making the players realise that it doesn't matter about league position in a game. It's 90 minutes. It's like 2 gladiators going into an arena, and the gladiators fight to the death. You can't look at the other gladiator and say they're bigger, stronger, got a bigger reputation, a better track record in the arena. No, you have to dig deep down and bring up your absolute best and go in the attack. You can't just defend. Yeah. So we came out the traps and scored in the second minute at Aberdeen.
Wow.
Sam Parkin, I think, scored that goal. English striker. And Aberdeen equalised. Then we went out and scored again. Kenny McLean scored a great goal from about 30 yards. And then Aberdeen equalised, went to extra time. We should have had a penalty in extra time. Player was brought down in the box by the goalkeeper, wasn't given. Oh, wow. In fact, the player was booked for diving, which was never the case. But let's not talk about referees. And it went to penalty kicks. And I think maybe Jim Goodwin, who is the manager at St Mirren now, he scored, I think, was the winning penalty right in front of the Aberdeen fans. And it was a great celebration that he had. Jim at the time was a pantomime villain in Scottish football, had a few red cards, was quite aggressive on the pitch. Fantastic leader, Jim, and the nicest guy you would ever meet off the pitch. And no surprise to me, he's doing well in management. And Aberdeen are actually trying to poach him as manager just now. But
Wow.
his celebration in front of the Aberdeen fans, he just stood with his arms up and stared at them for about a minute after he scored the winning penalty. It was just crazy. But what a tremendous! No one gave us a shot at winning that game, but we progressed.
Now, I'm just wondering from a psychology point of view, as you win contests that you're not expected to win, and as you build that winning kind of mentality, so you're winning week in, week out, or you're winning games consistently, how does that change your team dynamic? How does that change a thought process mentally going into playing somebody like Celtic?
Yeah, the top players will always feed off that confidence, and they will be consistent as they move forward. It will only spur them on to do better. And at St Mirren, with the greatest of respect, some of the players, this was new territory for them, a cup run like that, and they hadn't progressed to international standard football or anything at that time. And some of the players, although it was a massive confidence boost to have these wins, they were inconsistent that season. Sometimes they would take the foot off the pedal just that little bit. You think that when you've done well, that it will just automatically happen again. It's part of the learning curve for any player. And it was a learning curve for some of these players who went on to become outstanding players. But that whole season actually was inconsistent. But the big challenge for us going into the Celtic game was that we had played Celtic 9 times before that under Danny's leadership, and hadn't even scored a goal against Celtic. We'd never picked up a point, never got a draw, and never scored a goal. So that was a real crisis of confidence for the players going into that game, having played 9 games against Celtic and never scored before. Wow. So belief was something that we worked on for the whole week running up to the game. I had pulled out footage of previous St Mirren teams that had beat Celtic from years ago and from various decades, big games. St Mirren beaten Celtic in cup games before in front of over 100,000 people at Hampden Park in Glasgow. So we watched that kind of footage. Austin McPhee, that I mentioned before, who was the analyst at the time at St Mirren, he compared the current Celtic team to a Celtic team from 10 years before, how many international caps they all had. And it was quite a drop down from where the team Celtic was 10 years plus before, where they got to the UEFA Cup final, for example, and lost out 3-2 to Porto in that game. And had players like Henrik Larsson playing for them. They still had internationals playing at Celtic, but the number of caps was a fraction of what it was before. So we tried to change the mentality of looking at Celtic, because with teams like Celtic and the club's own track record against them in the short term, you can be defeated before you even walk onto the park. You think this is just a Herculean task, that we're facing Goliath here, and this club with vast resources. You can actually adopt a mentality that it's impossible to win. You can go and put on the best show that you can, but it's impossible to win. We turned that rhetoric on its head to say it is absolutely possible to win. We're due a win. Let's do it this time. Let's be like the St Mirren teams of old, who, against all the odds, still beat Celtic, the bigger club. And we focused on that. We focused about playing as a team. That Celtic had great individuals, but if we gelled as a team, if we played for each other, if we gave our heart and soul for each other, then it's a team sport. And that team ethic can trump the great individual players that Celtic have.
And was there any message that you particularly delivered that week, or as you were getting ready for the game, that you remember, to an individual player or to the team?
For the Celtic game, no, it was a consistent with the team. I had more time with the team than I had for any other game, I would say, was the Celtic game. And it was all about belief and challenging the players' mentality to believe that this was our time, that we were going to be cup shock of the season by beating Celtic at Hampden Park. And just moments before we went out to play, I actually asked Danny if I could take the players' minds somewhere else, and we showed a short video, not of a football message or a motivational message from a speaker or anything. It was a short video of a father who talked about him and his son being a team. His son was severely disabled, but he competed in the Ironman. The son wanted to be with his dad competing in the Ironman, so they did the Ironman competition with the swimming, the running, the cycling, and shows you a video of the father in his 50s. He's swimming, he's got a rope around his waist, pulling his son in a dinghy in this Ironman competition. And then he goes on to the bike, and his son has got a seat in the front of the bike, and he's on this whole journey with his father. And then as they're running together, the father's actually pushing the son in a kind of makeshift buggy, a tricycle buggy. And together, just seeing the joy in the son's face, and the father talks about that's the joy of being a team. That when you're a team, you make things possible. My son could never run or cycle or swim, but when I give him my strength, as a team we do it, and he encourages me and inspires me. So that was the message we put to the team. And I think that maybe that took away some of the nerves. It was almost a ridiculous thing to show, totally non-football, to inspire a team about football. But I think it took some of the nerves away, and they went out and they played. One player actually we had a particular message for was a player that made his debut against Celtic. He was a Portuguese under-21 player that we just brought him in, and he hadn't even trained with the team. He actually turned up late for the training on Friday's flight was delayed, so he hadn't even trained with the team. And he came in the Friday, and I had a session with him. And in sports psychology, you have to very quickly assess the personality of a player. And I realised this guy is a confidence guy. He's got great bravado. So I used reverse psychology. And I told him, you shouldn't be playing tomorrow in this game. I said, I should be. I mean, I've come for games like this. And I said, but you're not ready. I just stepped off a plane. I'm ready. Put me in. No, you've not even trained with the team. People would say you shouldn't be starting or playing in this game. And he was getting really angry and aggressive. He's shouting, put me in the team. I'll show everybody what I can do. So I was absolutely pushing his buttons. And 8 minutes into it, he said, I said, well, how would you want to play? How do you know how to play with this team? He says, just tell the players to get the ball into the box early, and I'll do the rest.
Wow.
So that was the message that he came out with. That's what he wanted. So that's where his focus was. So in the 8th minute of the game against Celtic, he's only 8 minutes into his debut. Connor Newton, midfield player, throws the ball into the box early, and Isma Gonsalves throws himself at the ball and volleys it in off the post against Celtic. I think it was the first time he touched the ball for St Mirren.
Wow. And what happens after them? Tell us the next part of the story of the match.
Yeah, so we went 1-0 up at that time, and Celtic don't take that line down, and they absolutely dominated with possession, and they scored an equaliser just a minute before half time. It was a real blow because we had been doing so well up to that point, and a lesser team at that time could have just capitulated and said, well, that's it, we've had a chance if we'd gotten at half time 1-0. So immediately that was addressed to say, that was just a moment.
So do you say that? Do you say that? Does Danny say that?
That was Danny. Danny said that. Often I would catch Danny coming down the tunnel. Actually, in that game, I didn't catch Danny. Danny was straight in, and that was him straight off the bat saying, just forget about that. Really, you dominated that first half. It was 1-0. And we'll go back out there, and it's the same again, lads. It's the same again. Go out, come out the traps, take the game to Celtic. We're not lying down to this. We're going to take it to them. And we did. Incredibly, at the start of the second half, Celtic were awarded a penalty. Not incredibly, if anybody is watching this that watches Scottish football, they know that Celtic always gets penalties. When you play the Old Firm, when you play Celtic or Rangers, it's a surprise if they don't get a penalty. Anyway,
unless Ross is refereeing.
Dubious decision, but in goals that day was Craig Sampson. I worked a lot with Craig Sampson when it came to St Mirren, getting him into the first team, because his first season he was really on the bench all season, and this was the season that he was starting with a great goalkeeping coach, Paul Mathers, outstanding coach, who brought the best out of Craig Sampson, and I worked with Craig on his mentality and the focus and the attitudes. And that day against Celtic, Craig Sampson was fantastic, and taking the penalty for Celtic was Charlie Mulgrew, who is a penalty expert. Was an expert down in Blackburn Rovers when he was there, took all their penalties. At Aberdeen when he was there, took their penalties, took penalties for Scotland. Not that Scotland gets many penalties, and never misses. And on this day, hit the target, but Craig Sampson flew and put his big hands on the ball and saved the penalty. Turning point in the match.
Wow.
That's the moment when you really think, maybe this is our day then, because usually Celtic score and that's it. They're in the lead and the game's gone. 5 minutes later, St Mirren got a penalty. Wow. I think the referee's making up for it was a handball, same as the Celtic got the penalty. So again, you could argue it wasn't a penalty, but ball hits the hand, penalty given, and Paul McGowan, who was a Celtic player before coming to St Mirren, was rejected by Celtic, and St Mirren took him. He scores the penalty. So we go 2-1 ahead, and then just a few moments later, just a couple of minutes later, there's a corner. Corner gets knocked out, and the centre half, Mark McCausland, is still up for this corner, and he's out in the wing. Don't know how he got out in the wing, but he throws in a cross, and Stephen Thompson, former Scotland international, catches the ball in the volley, a scissors kick, and it flies into the net. There we are, 3-1 up.
Wow.
Remember the commentary, because I've watched that back many times, and the commentary saying this is sensational, absolutely sensational at Hampden. And it was great. And then Celtic scored in injury time, but it was still too late, 3-2. So having never scored a goal against Celtic in the previous 9 matches, to go to the National Stadium and to score 3 goals was sensational.
And what was the feedback like in the dressing room afterwards? You know, how did the players react to it?
Great excitement. There was singing and dancing. We're all going to Hampden. It was getting sung. Yeah, brilliant. It was a great day. Everybody in the team played to their full potential that day, and they all played for each other. And that was the focus that we had. They played as a team, and they never lay down to Celtic. They brought the best out of each other, and all credit to the players.
So you've gone from this huge high of Celtic, and you must then be going into the final thinking you can beat anybody. Yeah,
you do. But again, we went into the final as the underdogs because we were playing Heart of Midlothian, Hearts, a big club from Edinburgh. Again, a budget probably about 6 times, possibly more, what St Mirren had. International players in there from Eastern Europe and Scotland in their team. So again, we're going into there as underdogs. They brought the bigger fan base to the stadium as well. They had 2/3 of the stadium. St Mirren had 1/3 of the stadium. So again, it was the message to the players running up to the final was nobody expected us to beat Aberdeen on their home patch, but we did. Nobody expected us to score against Celtic. We scored 3 times. Nobody expected us to beat Celtic. We did. We're not supposed to be here, but we are. And so let's continue the journey. Let's maximise this. Let's make this the greatest moment in our careers. And
Do you
visualization.
think, sorry, just before you mention the visualization, but do you think when you can bring this team together with a simple vision that's so powerful and inspiring as that, do you think it just does something special within a dynamic of a group of people, of men?
It does. It does. That kind of message, it has to fall on the right ears. And credit to Danny Lennon, he brought together a fantastic squad of players. The youth and the experience, the technical ability and the skill. It was all there. It was a great blend throughout the team. And to have that and to have a result like against Aberdeen, like against Celtic, it builds the confidence, and it brings the platform in which you can put that message out to say, this is going to be a great day. This is going to be a day to remember. This is a day that you'll create wonderful memories for so many people. This is our day. And it was on St. Patrick's Day. And St. Mirren, as a club, the Saints, there was a connection there. St. Mirren, the club was named after, was one of the first Christians in Scotland, St. Mirren. And Mirren went to the local Celtic chief in the Paisley area of Scotland and shared the gospel. And the chief rejected the gospel. But St. Mirren says, the Holy Spirit's speaking to me right now. And he says that as your wife is giving birth, you will also experience that pain of childbirth, and it will stay with you until you receive the gospel. And that's what happened. The chief was stricken with great pains in his abdomen, and he called St. Mirren back, who prayed over him and released him from the pain, and the pain stopped immediately. Wow. He then given permission to share the gospel with the Celtic tribe, and they all became Christians. And wow. So the club in Paisley, St. Mirren, is named after the saint who founded the town. So we called it Saints' Day. This is Saints' Day. It's our day. It's Saints' Day because it was St. Patrick's Day. So and it turned out it was our day. It was the Saints' Day.
And you mentioned visualization. So leading up to going onto the pitch, what was the visualization process that helped the players?
Yeah, a couple of things. I worked with the team, and I would always ask them to close their eyes, listen to my voice. This is in team meetings. And I want you to picture yourself, you're playing at Hampden Park, and it is the Scottish League Cup final. And we're going into the last few moments of the game, and you've played the best game of your career. Last few moments of the game, and the score is St. Mirren 3, Hearts 0. That's the kind of visualization. And now I want you to hear the final whistle and feel the emotion. You've just won the cup. Listen to the shouts of your teammates congratulating you because you've played so well. Now I want you to visualize you're meeting your family, your loved ones after the game, and all the words that they're sharing with you. They're so proud of you. They've never seen you play so well. This is the best day of your career. And I would ask them to focus on that and feel the emotion of it. And with their eyes closed, I would always say to them, now, just shout out how you're feeling. And I'll say, oh, fantastic, wonderful, amazing. And so I worked with some of the players one-to-one on that. I worked with Stephen Thompson earlier in the season. He felt that he was trying too hard in games. That was St. Mirren was his boyhood team, and it was his dream to play for them. And he had been struggling a bit to score goals, felt he was trying too hard. And visualization is one of the techniques that we'd focused on. And not long after that, I actually scored his first ever hat-trick for St. Mirren when they beat, it was Ross County they beat that day. So visualization was a big thing for Stephen. And after the game, when we're on the pitch and we're celebrating because we won the game, it was St. Mirren 3, but Hearts 2, that was the score. Stephen came up and gave me a hug and a big kiss on the cheek, and he says, I haven't slept for about 3 nights, and I keep visualising like you've taught me, visualising I'm scoring for St. Mirren in the cup final. My boyhood team, it's my dream. And lo and behold, I think it was the 46th minute of the game that Stephen Thompson scored the second goal for St Mirren straight after half-time, doing what he does well, which is when a cross comes into the box, he cuts across the defender. Absolutely brilliant at that. And that's what he did, and got there first and put the ball in the top corner. And he said it was a very cathartic moment, and it's the loudest celebration he's ever had. It was a great release for him. And he says, now maybe I can sleep, stop visualising because I've done it.
Fantastic. I just want to, I'm conscious of time, so I want to just touch once more on the final and the aftermath. And then I want to just touch on an angle that maybe people don't really appreciate about every winner and every person that wins. And before then, we're going to ask you a personal question. So first of all, tell us about the aftermath of the Cup success. Tell me the things that you remember, the highlights, the moments that will stay with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, the Stephen Thompson moment was a good one on the pitch. I remember being on the pitch with the players celebrating, and remember the music, the song that went over the tannoy was Anything Can Happen, Ellie Goulding's song, which every time that comes on now, I just smile from year to year. You know, great going to Hampden. That was the National Stadium twice, and to score 3 goals against Celtic and then 3 goals against Hearts. It was an incredible achievement. In the dressing room, it was crazy. One of the directors of St Mirren had put in a couple of cases of champagne, so everybody was spraying each other with champagne. I casually hid one of the bottles and said, well, I'll not spray my bottle. I'll just take this home and share it with my wife, which I did. But just the euphoria and people going crazy, really, really happy, delighted. And then we had a bus parade through Paisley after that. And Paisley was lined. Thousands of people came out. It was great being on the bus up the top, sat beside Danny and Tommy Craig, the assistant manager, and we just took it all in.
What do you think it meant for the town of St Mirren?
The town, Paisley, it was a great time for the town, and just a great moment of joy and togetherness. And they set up a stage right in the centre of the town, and we all went up, and it was like a civic reception type thing, and they had a DJ and introduced all the players and the staff, who all got to lift the cup one by one in front of the whole town, and tens of thousands of people there. It was absolutely packed as far as the eye could see, and a great moment for a town that's had great economic hardship and difficulties and challenges. To have that as a special memory.
And I guess it's something that people constantly bring up with you, with Danny, probably with those players and the St Mirren fans.
Yeah, I think the players went out and celebrated for a few days with the fans, and actually the team struggled a bit for the rest of the season, believe it or not.
I'm not surprised.
Again, for a lot of the players, it was the first time they had that level of success, and they found that difficult to deal with. Again, it's part of the learning curve of being a professional athlete, and as you progress in your career, it is a learning curve that it takes a lot out of you, a cup run like that. And so preparation and recovery is absolutely paramount, and I think some of the players learned from that. So there's the likes of the John McGinns and Kenny McLeans who have had outstanding careers for club and country, playing in the richest league in the world, and they helped take their country to national finals for the first time in a generation. They learned from that experience, and as great professionals, they've just got better and better and better, and hats off to them.
Now, I think it's really apt that you've said about this dip that then happened afterwards, because and I really would love you to give us, your feedback on this. If you as a winner reach a goal, reach a pinnacle, reach the top success that you could ever envisage, something you've been building for so long, that you put all your efforts in, is it inevitable that you have to come sort of down the other side of the mountain? If you imagine you've been climbing,
Yep.
then you reach the Everest, you get that huge success. Is it just going to happen that you're going to come down the other side?
Yeah, players, they dream about lifting silverware, and not every professional footballer has the opportunity to win a tournament like that and to be success and have a winner's medal. I remember Andy Murray talking about this very well, that his whole life was geared towards winning Wimbledon, and he had sacrificed so much and pushed himself so hard for his entire adolescence and adult life, and there he won Wimbledon. And he says the next day, he says, what do I do now?
Mm.
You know, the levels of motivation dropped, and he did rise himself back up and move forward and win Wimbledon again and became world number one. And he's the greatest athlete that's ever came out of Scotland, no doubt about it, been voted so by the public pretty recently. But it killed some of his motivation, because that was his goal and he'd achieved it and been pushing it for years. And it's the same with these players. They put on a pair of boots when they're young boys, and they play through various clubs and have their parents taking them everywhere, and all the hopes and expectations on them. And they go through playing with thousands of teammates that never make it, and they eventually push themselves to the point they're playing in the Premier League, and they get to a cup final and they win. Wow, that actually dips your motivation momentarily. After that, you think, I've achieved what I set out to achieve. What do I do now? And it takes a special person to regroup and to push on to the next goal. Some people put lip service to it, and it's a bit half-hearted because they feel they've got what they needed. But other people have the hunger and desire to move on. And again, I refer to John McGinn, Kenny McLean, Paul Dummett, who've all went on to play in that top league.
And obviously, for those who don't know the St Mirren story, then, you know, the team and Danny have some real struggles. And I just wonder, as a final question, when you look back on that period of expectations, probably in the boardroom, expectations from the fans and the players and the manager, just not being able to go to that next level that then they're expecting, does that then lead to, sadly, what happens where St Mirren decide that they don't want Danny Lennon as manager anymore?
Yes, part of my role is to help raise the expectations in the club, to have more positivity at the club. So we have to talk about doing well, about our aspirations are to go up the league, to have the belief that we're going to do it, that we're good enough. And they did. When you think back on it, Danny was there for 4 years, kept them in the top league, which was his remit. He gave them their two highest finishes in the Premier League, which was 8th twice out of 4 years against teams with much bigger budgets. Won a national trophy for only it was the first time that St Mirren won the League Cup. So it was the first time in their 120-year history, or whatever it was at the time. And when the board decided not to renew Danny's contract, what they said to him was, we think you've taken St Mirren as far as you can. We think we need to go to someone else to move further up, because we had raised the expectations. At the start of his tenure at 4 years, they said, all you need to do is keep us in the Premier League. That's it. That's your job. That's what he was told. And he did that and more and more and more, and developed all these young players, developed the youth academy, such that in his last season, he had 7 first-team players that he had developed out of the youth academy. Almost all of them had played under 21 for Scotland or Wales. And many of them went on to be full internationals. And so the club decided to go with another manager, and they got relegated the next season. It's a familiar story that we see throughout football. I remember Bolton Wanderers, when Sam Allardyce took them into Europe and got them to that level, and then they sacked Sam Allardyce and told him, you've taken us as far as you can. We need to go to someone else to get us challenging for the league. And then they got relegated the next season, or 2 seasons after, I think. And they're now a forgotten team. Happens over and over again. That's the human story in football, men who lead football clubs who are successful in the business world and are very emotionally intelligent in that realm, they lose that emotional intelligence when they come into football. They're run by their emotion and make ridiculous decisions, which come back to bite them on the bum.
And what you just said leads into my final question that I'm going to ask you, because decision making is so key in every aspect of our life. Decision making in football, in home life, in work balance, all these kind of things feed into choices that we all get to make through our life. And I just wonder if you could finish off by telling us the answer to a question we ask all the guests that we get on Life Stories. It's a question we ask on a Monday night. So if you want to watch on a Monday night at 8 o'clock, you'll see this question asked by George Collins, our Life Stories reporter. You'll also see it asked of any guest who comes on a Friday with me. What's been the best decision you've made in your life, Stephen?
Yeah, I've made some good decisions and some bad decisions in my life, but I'll tell you absolutely the best decision that I've made was when I was 15 years old and I decided to give my life to God. I'd grown up in the church, but I kind of thought that it was all a bit like a fairy story, the Bible. It was a good news story, but perhaps it wasn't true. I just thought it was nice stories. I love the stories about Jesus. He did amazing things, raised people from the dead, healed the sick, brought the best out of people. And I loved that. But I wasn't sure that it was true. And I kind of wandered away from the church a little bit. But when I was 15, my grandmother was involved in a car accident. My grandparents were very strong Christians. And my grandmother was in a coma for a week. And the doctors had said that the brain damage, the injuries that she had sustained were so severe that they didn't think she would recover at all. She wouldn't be able to walk or talk or dress herself. And pneumonia had set into her lungs and they were just going to let her slip away. But my grandfather said, well, I'll get the minister to come and pray for her healing. And I remember saying to my grandfather, is that not a waste of time? The specialist has just told us that it's over, that she's gone. And my grandfather says, Stephen, I believe in God. And I believe that, and he quoted a verse from Hebrews that says that Jesus is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He healed 2,000 years ago. He heals today. So I remember going home that night and being very challenged by what my grandfather had said. And I prayed for the first time in my life, earnestly, honestly, and said, God, I need to know that you are real, that you are the God of the Bible that my grandfather talks about. If you are, it's nothing to you to heal my grandmother. You raise people from the dead. No problem to you if you're the God of the Bible. I need to know if you're real. And if you are real, I'll follow you. And the next day, the minister from my grandfather's church came to the hospital with a little bottle of oil, made the sign of the cross on my grandmother's head and put his hand beside her head and said a very simple prayer and said, Jesus, bring healing to this body. And as he said that, there was a power came into the room, a presence. You could feel it, tangible. And my grandmother opened her eyes, sat up in bed, started talking. She went on to make a full recovery. And I remember just going home that day and it's so amazed by what had happened. And I prayed and I heard the voice of God for the first time. The Bible talks about how God speaks in a still small voice. It's like a whisper. As I started to pray, this voice said, now do you believe? And I did, gave my life to God, and best decision I've ever made. Jesus is the ultimate role model. He's the ultimate inspiration. For me, I want to be like Jesus. He has a greater capacity for love than I've ever seen in any human being. He looks to bring the best out of people and help them to fulfill their full potential in life. And I know that I am a part of God's family. That's what the Bible tells me, and I know that. And it gives me great confidence to know that I am part of God's family, not just for this life, but for all eternity. One of my favourite verses in the Bible talks about how we are adopted into God's family. My wife and I, we adopted 2 children 3 years ago, and we know the adoption process. The adoption process is you actually choose the children. Out of all the thousands of children available, you choose these children to be part of your family, your household, and you know that you're choosing them. They're broken because of the start in life that they've had. Our children had a horrible start to life, but nonetheless, we chose them in all their brokenness. We chose to love them and to give them the best life that they could have. And that, for me, echoes that scripture in the Bible, in the New Testament, that says that we are adopted into God's family, that we are His adopted children with full rights as heirs of His kingdom. And my children will inherit my estate when my wife and I pass on. They are the heirs to everything I have. And the Bible tells us that I am an heir to everything that God has. And God has everything. He has absolutely everything. And there's nothing impossible for Him. And I could give you 1,000 stories of how God has made my life better, how I've seen Him do miraculous things and change lives for the better. Absolutely the best decision I've made. And I would encourage anybody watching this, take a step of faith. Put your faith in Jesus Christ. Give your life to Him, because He gave you your life and He has the plan for it. And I would never have been able to pick the life that I've had. I've had great things happen in my life, and it's all been God's plan. And I'm glad that I've been obedient to His leading, because it's been better than I ever thought my life would be. Sensational.
Fantastic, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you with us for the last hour, and it's been a real insight into some incredible moments in your life. If you're watching this and you would like to talk to somebody, if you would like support with your life story, you can ring us on 07943 550287. I'll say it again, 07943 550287. If you're outside of the UK, send us a message on WhatsApp and put +44 if you're outside of the UK. We've got a team of people who answer the phone all the time who would love to speak to you and talk to you about your life story. There's also a link there, and you can go to our website, LifeStoriesWorldwide.com, and get in touch with us. Stephen, thank you again for being with us. If you've loved what Stephen said and you've enjoyed it, come back and join us again next Friday. We've got another guest. And don't forget that on Monday night, we've got a live story at 8 o'clock, which we'd love you to join us for. Thank you, Stephen.